All right, so we're almost at quorum, so we're going to let folks trickle in, and we may shift the voting of the minutes and other voting activities to the end if we need to. So we know that there's enough time. Good evening, everyone. I'm standing here because I want to. I'm Meryl, Executive Vice President of Partnership for New York City and co-chair of the Workforce Development Board, along with Audrey Powell, sitting here. Will you hear with them for today? Thank you all for joining us. I know it's a very busy time. I now call the board meeting formally to order. One thing we've heard from you, many of you over the past year, is in setting aside more time for discussion during the meetings. So we've done that today. So that's why there's small tables. We'll be working together in groups for two particular sessions during the meeting. We'll include some updates and report outs from agencies. So thank you, agency folks, for being here, always giving us your time. And then we're going to move to potential changes for bylaws, and then a working group on SNAP and Medicaid. I will be presiding over the first part, and Audrey Powell will preside over the second. With a couple of quick updates on the calendar, we are working with New York City Talent to schedule all of our quarterly board meetings for next year in advance, and plan to release that calendar in the coming months. The strategic roadmap. Thank you again for everyone who's participated in the process. The work is continuing. You will be getting updates shortly. We engaged more than 200 participants and leveraged information from many different focus groups and listening sessions, including directly to job seekers. The work has resulted in more than 550 strategies and ideas that were put forward to improve the workforce ecosystem. So we are currently in the process of working with the steering committee and New York City Talent to bucket those strategies and ideas, and then slowly pull out the ones that we think have the most promise. And then we're putting all of those into a strategic roadmap. We hope to publish the roadmap early next year, and look forward to working with the incoming mayoral administration and strengthening the workforce system to make the city more affordable for the city. As I keep saying, we don't have a job. Hoping that the administration really pays attention to the important work we've done over the year and brings us into the conversation. I don't want to. We will now hear. Oh, sorry, about an important thing. Right on the heels of that, we also like to recognize a number of board members who've been selected to serve on one of Mayor-elect Montano's transition committees. Board members Grace Amia from the United Way, Bela Matias Rodriguez from CUNY, and Daphne Rose Sanchez from Connecticut Community Institute. So thank you all for. We look forward to working with you and your representatives. Yes. Yeah. And now we'll hear a few welcoming remarks from Doug Lafari, Executive Director, Office of Town Workforce.
Thanks, Meryl. Formal standing up. I just wanted to say thank you, right? Really appreciate the work that everyone has done here on the board. There's been a lot of it. Appreciate the time and the commitment that everyone helping make the board be all that it can be, right? And really excited about the work ahead. As Meryl mentioned, right, we're heading into a transition. It's an exciting time, and I think the board is really well positioned with all of the work that we've done so far, but more importantly, all the work that is coming up ahead. And so we think that the board is really well positioned to play a critical role in helping shape what the new administration does, thinks about, feels, wants, cares about with respect to workforce development. So excited about the strategic roadmap that is coming. I've said we're finalizing that, and we really think that that will be a really important role that the new admin and all of us and all of the partners across the ecosystem will look to as a roadmap really for the work ahead. And so appreciate everyone's time, commitment today, prior, in the future, of what we're all going to ask from you all as board members, and just excited about the work ahead and excited about this meeting. I appreciate Scott French joining us. Very busy person these days. They're taking time out to come and talk about the important work that is happening, work requirements tied to what's happening. Really important. So I'll turn it back to Meryl. It won't take a lot of time, but just want to say thank you and appreciate this time.
So we will now take a vote on the meeting minutes for the board meeting that took place on October 8th. You can find the minutes on page 5 of your packets. And then do I have a motion to approve? Thank you. Do I have a second? All in favor? Now I'm going to turn it over to for the director.
Good afternoon, everybody. Cold enough for you out there? Yeah, there we go. So I have 3 brief updates. We definitely have some robust, good conversations coming up, so I don't want to take a lot of time, but I have a couple of pieces of good news to share. So as Doug said, thank you all very much. Many of the members contribute a lot of time to helping us develop the 2025 to 2029 WIOA local plan. And I mentioned at the last meeting, or we voted on it, approved it at the last meeting. We submitted it to New York State Department of Labor. They said we had everything in order. We got signatures, and we just confirmed earlier this week that it was finalized. So it's done. Yay. So thank you for that. Another small bit of good news, just an update to something that I mentioned last time. In the October meeting, I described how WIOA we get our WIOA money for the year in 3 tranches, right? And typically it goes to the state on April 1st, July 1st, and October 1st. Our last meeting was, I think, October 8th. We hadn't quite gotten our money yet, but we had been told that it was forthcoming. USDOL said it's going to come, but there was the federal government shutdown. Well, it came. It came about a week after our last meeting. So we are good. We are whole for this current fiscal year. USDOL did right by us. So there was a slight delay, but it was just heartening to see that, because we just didn't want that to be another area where uncertainty would linger. So we were very happy to confirm that. Okay. The third and final thing that I want to provide an update is that every 3 years, speaking of the U.S. Department of Labor, every 3 years they conduct what they call a consolidated compliance review, and they are essentially performing an audit of the New York State Department of Labor and how they are implementing WIOA within the state. But they also choose 2 local areas as kind of a sample. And of course, New York City being very big and having a very big budget, we are almost always selected. Yay. And guess what? We won the lottery for 2026, guys. This is great. Go buy your lotto tickets tonight. So, just to be clear, like, we've done this many times before. This is a standard audit. It covers fiscal issues. It covers program issues. It covers governance issues. They look at a lot of stuff. But it is very standard. We don't expect any major surprises. It's going to start in February. Our colleagues in Dutchess County were the other lucky winners of this lottery, so they're going to be visited by the good folks from USDOL. The folks that are coming have a pretty good relationship with the New York State Department of Labor, so there's no one that's, we're I think anticipating that we will not have any major surprises. So that's good. But we'll keep you up to date. We'll let you know how it goes. And just a heads up to our agency partners, Yuri heard this earlier today, but we're going to have to ask for a whole bunch of documents really fast, because we just got the request from New York State Department of Labor. Hopefully it's stuff that we have ready to go, but it's going to be a tight turnaround. So work with some SPS and DYCD to turn that around. So thanks, everybody. That's it for me.
Thank you, Chris. Now here an update from the Department of Youth and Community Development and the Department of Small Business Services about their work. We'll start with hearing from Valerie Mulligan from the USCD. And given our packed agenda, we've asked her to highlight just one specific program rather than giving all of the agency's activities. Valerie will be providing an overview of the community resources for employment activities. Yes.
Thank you, Meryl. Victor. Hey. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the time. I know last time I was here, we got caught up in talking about all the great things that DYC has been doing on SYP. So I'm really excited to share something a little bit different that DYCD has been investing really heavily in, which is our advanced training programs for an older population, a more disconnected population that we've invested significantly in over the last 4 years. And one of the major investments that we've made is in a new program called CRED. I did not name it. Community Resources for Employment and Development. And so I wanted to make sure you were all aware of the program, kind of understood the philosophy behind it, could answer any questions, and also could, help us along the way as we try to grow this program and think about what industries we should be investing in and what services we should be wrapping around into this program. So the goal of this program is to provide a pathway to economic mobility for young people and adults. This program goes up to the age of 40, which is new for DYCD, in New York City who face socioeconomic barriers to obtaining employment. We're looking for underemployed or unemployed New Yorkers who are New York City residents, and we are really prioritizing populations with barriers to employment that include justice involvement or who are impacted by community violence. Low income, a lot of investment in NYCHA developments in terms of where our providers are recruiting from and located. And this program is really the most comprehensive, fully funded program that DYCD has ever launched. We're really proud of the model and resources that we've invested into each one of our participants here. So not only does it include work readiness, occupational training, paid internship placements, but every hour that the participants are in the program is paid at $20 an hour. And we have found that that's a really significant way of actually retaining and engaging participants, is paying them when they come to us, because so many of these participants have those barriers, childcare, all those other things that they need to be able to balance with doing a training program, and having that paid support to do the training has really helped us keep our engagement numbers up. We also, in true DYCD fashion, offer wraparound services, follow-up services, and of course, the ultimate goal of this program is job placement. So as part of that follow-up service, we're following our participants to make sure that they land in full-time. I wanted to highlight the staffing plan because we have required of our providers in this program a really comprehensive staffing plan. This is not intended to be a light touch program. This is intended to be you come to the door and you get what you need in order to get your credential and get a job. So every program has 8 full-time staff, a program director, job developer, outreach and retention specialist, mental health counselor, 2 case managers, and 2 training instructors. We also required, as part of the procurement, community partnerships, so a partnership with an employer partner and a partnership with social services or post-secondary partners. The program offers about a year of services that include all those things I just mentioned: the work readiness training, career-specific skills training, and paid internships, and then the 3 months of follow-up services after they exit the program. Of course.
Oh, was that complicated? Why not ask that? And sorry, I've been on the provider side for a long time, and now on the employer side. But I mean, I get it. You need certain staffing requirements and levels, but why does government always prescribe what they think the staffing plan should be, instead of being deferential to the experts who do this work every day with this population, to come up with a staffing plan that they think works based upon the model?
I think it's a really good question. My short answer, although I'd love to have a full conversation with you about this, is that we at a very big picture level struggle with a lot of our providers and see a lot of understaffing and see that they are not always able to provide the supports that we want them to provide if we aren't quite prescriptive with them about what we want to see. And part of this is just the way the city manages contracts, where we need to be able to say to a provider, here's the 3 ways we see that you're not meeting the things that we put out for you on the contract. There are for sure trade-offs to that. And I will also say anecdotally, my team here, we are working very closely with every provider to help them meet this in the way that they think is best. So it certainly does not look as prescriptive as this lays out on the ground, because we absolutely acknowledge, especially in this program, some of our providers are large, some of our providers are teeny, brand new to working with city government. And so we have taken the approach of trying to navigate that challenge that it's a great question though, but it is something we've struggled with. And I think we have found that laying it out this way is actually the most effective way across the provider spectrum to make sure that providers are able to deliver what we need them to deliver. Happy to talk more about that. It's a good question. Okay. So this program is a baby. The first 8 awards were made and the programs launched earlier this year in January, February, March. There are 8 programs currently running. On the next slide, I'll show you what those programs actually are. And then we are growing this program really quickly. So we've just made 8 new awards and anticipate that those programs will be launching in early 2026, January, February. Each provider is funded at $780,000 per fiscal year, which doesn't include the participant wages. DYCD pays those directly. So that's just for them to staff and run their program. And these contracts run through right now, June 30th, 2027. So this is really it's like in the middle of a pilot and a fully fledged program, because we haven't, we don't have 6-year contracts here. We're trying to learn from how this goes so that when we do a full RFP, we have a lot of evidence in terms of what we do. The total budget for the program, Zane, tell me, does this include wages? I don't think so. It doesn't. The total budget for the program is something upwards of like $50 million by full scale, but this is the money that's going to the provider. So this isn't including the money that's going to the participants. We are scaling 500 slots this FY25, so last fiscal year. We're hoping to hit 1,000 slots this year, 1,500 next year, and 2,000 the year after. We have 8 programs, like I said, operating right now, and we plan to achieve the 2,000 number using 16 programs because we have seen that a lot of the programs we currently have are doing really well and can expand. So we plan to do this expansion plan using the 16 programs that we have onboarded already. So just really quick, wanted to show everybody who these programs are. And I really want to highlight the diversity in sector and in type of provider. So we have Common Point, United Activities Unlimited, huge entrenched providers that we've worked with in all of our programs for years. And then we have folks like Renaissance Technical Institute, Brownsville Community Culinary Center, who have never really had sustainable city funding. And this, if I can say, is something I'm especially proud of, because we spent a ton of time thinking about how we drafted the RFP to allow a huge array of different types of providers into this program. We really didn't want only the same groups who have always done this work before to be with us. We wanted new groups on the ground. I think we really successfully did that. And then we have our kind of like stalwart, amazing providers in there too. And we created a community where they're all learning from each other. And so in like a DYCD spirit, this is a little bit of us kind of building up the smaller providers while we invest in those that we know can do a good job. And you can see the sectors, the boroughs are in every borough. Healthcare, culinary arts, maintenance, construction, industrial, electric, a wide array of sectors as well. And because I can't help but brag, I did want to share a couple of concrete examples of what this program has looked like so far. So this is what I love. It's a story of a participant. I've made up his name, but we'll call him Dev, who was part of the United Activities Unlimited CDL Class B program. And we heard a lot about this participant because he's someone who had been driving unofficially for years. So he was really skilled. He knew everything about driving trucks, but he just could never get over the hurdle of passing the credential to get a real full-time job. And so after joining the program, he ended up sort of being an advisor to the other students. It's been really cool to see the age range of this program be 18 to 40 because we've got a whole range of backgrounds and experiences in the classroom. He ended up not only being a great advisor to them and helping many of them pass the license exam, he ended up passing the license exam and was immediately hired by Coastal Plumbing, a Staten Island-based company where he obviously earns a very competitive wage. And even more so, something I'm proud of is he's still very connected to the provider. So he's returning to them to ask them how to help update his resume, to start looking for how he can continue to grow. And I think that's something DYCD does just especially well. Our providers know how to keep in touch with their participants, and the investment in this program has allowed them to develop relationships. So that's one. Brownsville Community Culinary Center in Brooklyn has been a real bright spot. They offer training and have become the type of program that, I think speaking on behalf of the director of this program, who's really proud of this, have engaged the entire community. So a bunch of my team members attended their graduation, and there were parents, children of the participants. It was joyful, and these participants had all obtained a credential and had placements and internships and are on the pathway to getting a job. Two of them were hired by the folks who hosted them as interns, which I think is always a really strong sign that our training and work readiness work is actually paying off, because it means that once they're placed in their internship space, the employers are excited to bring them on board full time. So we're really excited about our partnership with BCCC, and we hope to grow that. And then one more I want to highlight real fast, RTI, Rensselaer Technical Institute, Renaissance, I always say Rensselaer. Renaissance Technical Institute, who does an array of trainings, but right now there are participants actively being trained in, oh boy, I'm going to say this wrong, an optometry credential. Again, they have a really strong partnership with one of RTI's board members, who is actually the doctor who's doing the training right there on the right. He's hosting them he's involved in the training. He's involved in the internship. He's bringing on his partners to do the internships, and then he's helping RTI find placement. So it's a real provider, employer, training partner partnership. Okay, that's not mine. So that's what I got for you. And I just want to say, everybody, please come visit a CRED program with us. I would love to host any of you. Next time, I'm going to ask Doug if I'm allowed to bring a participant or a provider along with me so that you can hear from them directly.
To join as opposed to all coming to you with us. So maybe Randy needs. Oh, is it that one here?
Rambunctious. First, Brownsville Community Culinary Center, amazing. Their Chef Aquino is like a walking saint. He has really kept that place alive. By the way, they could use capital funding. So if you have, thoughts about that, they've got this amazing asset that needs an updating, really needs support. So that's my pitch. Look, I have two dreams left in my life as I come towards the fourth quarter of my life. The first is to see the Mets win the World Series, and that's not likely to happen if they find a new way to disappoint every year. But the second is that to see government put out an RFP that's like a blank sheet of paper, and it says, "Here's the goal. You tell us the best way to get there." So I'm just putting that out there for consideration to all my friends in government, that if you left the field wide open, you may really come up with some most amazing, innovative ideas on how to achieve goals, rather than 48-page RFPs, 2 bidder conferences, the legal team review, and all this other stuff. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I think you have a better chance. I'm Henry Garrido. Thank you. I think you have a better chance of having the Mets win the World Series than the second part. And part of it, folks, it's unfortunately, we are government for a reason, and we have to abide by certain principles. And I think there was an illusion, I'll say it, people cheat. I have seen plenty of providers fall short of what they promised to do. And so the more extent that you put in writing what you expect them to do, unfortunately, that's the way it is. I wanted to also take a moment to plug in to really praise the YCD for the work with the Renaissance Training Institute. I know the work that they do. I know the work that's done in the community, not only in Harlem, but now in Staten Island, which for many was the forgotten border. And the work that they've done has been outstanding, tremendous. And I want to thank you because this would have been one of those programs that would have been excluded because they either didn't have the capacity or didn't have the capital, but we're doing the work, right? And we're doing it by patchwork. So thank you so much. I can tell you that this particular program has helped so many other people that were in the welfare work recipients that used to be part of our membership that would refer them to, that has provided a real path of upward mobility, training, education, and young people in areas in Harlem. And I cannot say no. Thank you so much for the work you've been doing.
Have a sports gene, so I don't know about the Mets winning. But on procurement flexibility, the procurement policy board did approve a method called challenge procurement. The first challenge procurement, I think, was released early this calendar year. EDC released one, I think, within the last month. And SBS and other agencies are also looking at the challenge procurement methodology. Unlike the, say, small purchase method with MWBEs, it's not necessarily more efficient for the agency to develop and release a challenge procurement. I wish it was, but it definitely allows city agencies to pose a question to the field and then source solutions from folks who have good ideas to solve the problem. And then the nuanced difference to a demonstration project is that instead of then having to re-solicit vendors to extend or offer further services on those contracts, you can extend the original contract. And so in that way, you achieve some efficiency, and also you're able to kind of, yes, test for different approaches. So we're excited to use that this year, but we're not able to use it with all sources of funding. And I think the city is still getting up speed on how to release those procurements.
All right, really fast. I also, this may not satisfy you, but what I do want to say, especially about this program, is the amount of stakeholder engagement we did beforehand was not light. If you ask who created that design of the staffing, Chef Lex was in the room, David was in the room, the folks who are at these providers were, I mean, we were at their spaces, my team, saying, tell us what you need to do this. And everything they told us was in that RFP. So I am really proud of that and just didn't want that to go unsaid.
So we're gonna.
Is Mike, it also extends to philanthropy, because philanthropy, which puts out a ton of money in the workforce space, does the same thing. They issue RFPs and then they tell the providers how to run.
Yes.
Good afternoon, board members. Happy holidays. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. We're under strict time orders from Chris, so I promise I won't do him wrong. Just wanted to, at the board's request, wanted to give you a brief update on implementation of the Workforce One contract. So as you know, they were re-RFP'd within the past year and a half or so. We selected 4 different vendors in order to be able to, through a competitive bid process, the contracts for the industrial and transportation centers started on July 1, and the remainder of the contracts started on October 1. So just wanted to give you brief highlights about our work there. Extensive work with each of the vendors by our Workforce One team, especially with Goodwill, which was the new vendor, as you know, for this procurement cycle. Happened before the first day of the contracts even took effect. So especially with Goodwill, there was a lot of professional development, a lot of technical assistance, a lot of on-site help, both meeting with them before they took over the center and also frequently, especially in the first few weeks, there was pretty much staff from Workforce One, from SBS, on site every day. There were also a lot of planning and strategy meetings with things around like Worksource One, which is our CRM, as you know, our data analytics system. Things like telephones, coordinations with the state. Many of the, a lot of our hub centers are co-located with State Department of Labor centers. So please forgive me. I should have put that in it like I always do. And of course, the one time that I did it. So coordination with the New York State Department of Labor, technology, things of that nature. And of course, technical assistance as well. You know, as you saw in our memo, we were off to a bit of a slower start this year in terms of our engagement, in terms of our engagement of businesses and in terms of placements and hires as well. I'm pleased to say that with some really dedicated work by our team in conjunction with the centers, those numbers, not the numbers, but the placements and the hires and the good work that we're doing to help our clients are increasing and enhancing for October and November. For October, we were around at the level we were at this October last year. And for November, we actually haven't counted all the numbers yet, but the preliminary data say that our number of placements or our number of hires, the number of clients that we're able to place into jobs, the number of clients we're able to help is increased over this time last year. So we're very excited about that. I've also had the good opportunity to visit about a third of our network in 4 of the 5 boroughs, but I'm in Staten Island frequently, so and I will be shortly. So been able to support those centers too, even outside of Goodwill. Speak with the staff, see what supports they need, see what's going well, see what we could enhance. So that's been a really good experience. And in terms of making sure that our staff have the support they need around placements and hires, we've been doing a number of things. One is some more professional development and technical assistance, like I was speaking about earlier. We've also done some enhancements and improvements to our data dashboard to make sure that our center leaders and our staff here have the tools that they need, in order to be able to really know where concentrated or targeted support is needed. We're also looking at the data even more, and we're developing individualized plans for each center. So we're choosing 5 or so areas for each center, things that they could really focus on in order to be able to serve clients in the best possible way. And we're also doing a community grants program around business development. You may recall I talked last time that we've enlisted community-based organizations to help us do engagement work in the community. We're also engaging community-based organizations to help connect us to some of the local businesses that we haven't reached. So that's all good news. Finally, on the Jobs NYC front, that's our mayoral initiative in order to be able to connect with communities where rates of unemployment are high. We continue to do great work in that area. We've had over 40 hiring halls or job fairs. They've reached 15,000 people since they started in February 2024. So we're very proud of that. Our employer satisfaction rate, those giving us a 4 or a 5 in terms of saying these are useful, we would come again, is 95%. And our job seeker satisfaction rate is close to 90%. There's actually the last one for the year is tomorrow. It's at the Brooklyn Army Terminal in Sunset Park. You are all invited to come. If you're in the neighborhood of the Army Terminal, we have our Industrial and Transportation Center there. It's run in partnership with our colleagues at Grant Associates who are represented here. And we're really excited that we get to finish out the year with that event. And we wish it much success. And let me turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Harris.
Thanks, Yuri, not just for your report, for all your good work in leading the CWO team here at SBS. I've been asked to speak about the carry-in in our budget. So reflected in your packet and previously approved by the board was a FY26 budget of $73,761. That's broken into $33.4 million for the Workforce One Career Centers, $20 million for training programs, $3 million for the Business Solution Center network and our fast track programming, and just under $17 million for personnel and OTPS. This represents a budget, an overall budget that is $10 million higher than the FY25 budget of $63,860,000. And the increase in the cost of delivering our work is due to multiple factors: negotiated staff increases over the past few years, mandated increases in indirect cost rate for contracted vendors, and increases in all the costs of delivering the programming, including increased fixed costs, including real estate, but also the software licenses, security, all of the costs of delivering a walk-in system. The carry-in for this year is $41.7 million. And that is not an accident. It's not an oversight. It's not due to not being ambitious in our programming. We've worked to be excellent stewards as the fiscal agent of WIO resources for the city for more than 20 years, since the function was shifted to SBS from the Department of Employment due to fiscal management concerns. That's one reason you can be confident that the coming audit will go smoothly, because across multiple commissioners, changes in our budget team, we take this work very seriously and we don't leave money on the table. To the contrary, we tend to be awarded additional funds by NISDAL because we have a strong track record of excellence in delivering programming and managing these funds. So we've budgeted and planned to manage complex procurement and contracting so that we can continue to provide a resource for New Yorkers of this walk-in adult workforce system without a gap in service, and in a way that can adapt to shifting demands, such as happened during the migrant and asylum seeker crisis and other changes on the horizon. So this means managing a system with significant fixed costs with a shrinking amount awarded. So this year, the NOA amount for FY26 is $57 million, $57.9 million. That's down from $65 million last year. So the carry-in, which has never exceeded permissible limits and is still within permissible limits, is a strategic budgeting tool to maintain stability in the system, with potentially further shrinking awards. So anticipating annual reductions, further reductions in the notice of award amount. The carry-in amount will also decline over the next 3 fiscal years, from $41 million this year to $30 million in FY27, $8 million in FY28, and $0 in FY29, leaving SBS $20 million short of the needed budget to operate this work. And that's assuming our delivery costs stay flat 4 years, which is also unlikely. So to avoid this hole, we are working to reduce real estate costs of the system. We're also hopeful that we'll add funding from other sources with this board's support and other fundraising. We're also, we've been attempting to increase city tax levy investment in the system. No success this fiscal year, but we'll continue to work on that. The one area where we have been able to add CTL is Jobs NYC. So I hope you all saw the van parked outside One Liberty when you came in today. That van is doing a lot of business across New York City. Yesterday, we did a hiring event for Liesel Transportation in Coney Island, serving 30 job seekers with all of the intake happening on the van. So it's both a way of promoting the work of the system and actually serving job seekers. But again, we need more CTL to manage the federal funding risks, especially those that might come with adaptations and WIO funding if there's further adjustment to a Black grant. So I hope that's helpful in explaining why we've got to carry in, why it's important and appropriate, and I'm happy to take questions.
Good afternoon again, Henry Garrido. I want to present the comments because I couldn't disagree more with the presentation regarding the workforce. And my comments are based on this. So the $33 million that you're spending to run uh, 15, 16, 17 workforce centers. You highlighted the Goodwill as the only nonprofit who's doing this. Every single one of the workforce centers being run by for-profit institution
That's right.
that collects between 15 and 18% of for-profit fee before they spend one penny on workers. There, and this is based on data that is on the contracts. The Grant Associate Center, for instance, I'll take an example, runs a center with $6 million with a for-fee profit of $986,000 before you spend $1 on wages. The EDSI contract for Washington Heights, for instance, we have such good programs have similar numbers, while you're still paying for rent, overhead, OTPS, and so many. So if you calculate a center, for instance, $6 million, $3 million are going to wages, everything is going to either shore up or for-profit fee to that institution. Having so many centers like NYC, ET, others like NIMIC in the community in that area, for instance, as an example, I could go through the others in Brooklyn too, that provide quality services nonprofit. I cannot see how that's possible. Now, we do know that to the point very early, there's an RFP process and you need to have organizational capacity and capital and all that stuff. But it would seem to me hard to believe that of the majority of the centers, the efforts that you made with Goodwill, which I think are good, could not be replicated in other places. I cannot comprehend this
What effort are you referring to, Henry?
What's that?
What effort with Goodwill are you
The
referring to?
Goodwill is the only center that is a nonprofit organization that's running workforce. So everything else is being run by DBA Grants and Associate or EDSI.
So we did release a competitive solicitation. We did do very significant outreach to all registered providers in Passport. We partnered with ATC to further publicize the opportunity to nonprofit providers. And we selected Goodwill as a provider with the capacity to deliver on the system. Everything was, ranked and rated according to WIOA rules, according to the city's rules. And we also invited talent, DYCD, HRA into the solicitation review process. So to bring in further insight from across the workforce system. And regarding the fee for profit, what we have structured in the new contracts is a 20% performance-based portion of the budget for the contracts. So EDSI, Grant, and Goodwill all have a 20% component in their budget that they will access if they achieve, all of the goals in the report card and the deliverables for the contract. It appears differently in the for-profit contract as opposed to the nonprofit contracts because the nonprofits cannot have profit under federal rules. So it does show up differently in their budgets, but it is equal across the vendors to have a goal of having some skin in the game to ensure that we are achieving impact in what is a costly system to operate for job seekers.
So let me just further push back, because what it does is set up an even system that is unfair for the nonprofit institutions. You are incentivizing for-profit institutions to meet their goals. And when nonprofits do not meet the goals, they get punished, but they don't get the same reward on the other.
But is it
So-
not an incentive for them to also meet their goals?
Pardon me, yeah, we want them to meet the goals. But there are other ways that you could do to incentivize local. So I am familiar with the RFP process. I've actually been in this process before. And my first problem is the way that it was scored to begin with, the criteria by which you put the organizational requirement. Because there's a lot to be said for a value of a local institution that's a nonprofit that is in the city of New York, unlike some of the ones that you have here. ETSI, for instance, is a Michigan-based institution, right? So for a local community group, nonprofit institution that could be providing valuable organizational capacity to train workers there ought to be something that recognizes that. That is not just dollars and cents, right? That you're talking about. And of course, a for-profit institution is going to have more capital than a nonprofit to begin with. They have reserves, they have investors. Some of these for-profits are being funded by private equity funds that are going to put up the money because they're going to make up the money. So if everything is equal, right? If we're training the workers, if we say we want you to meet a certain goals for wages, we want you to meet a certain criteria for placing people and do it in good paying jobs, right? And things, all of that. Why not allow for a scoring system that allow for very good local organizations and nonprofits who have been doing tremendous works, like we heard from the YCD, to have a fair shot? And I'd say, look, this is not, there was nothing nefarious about this. I just fundamentally believe that the workers that are being serviced, having represent the union, deserve better. That for-profit fee should be going to either wages or to helping local communities or creating more jobs.
So-
Not too sure. I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about this. I mean,
We feel equally strong.
yeah, no, I get 20% to me. Think about it. You do what you're supposed to do and you're going to get a 20% reward. And by the way, you're still paying for TPS, still helping rent and so on. So I'm going to stop. But I think we could do better and allow for organizations locally to tap into this process and train workers and do just as well and help them out in the way that DYCD did theirs. Not to do a comparison, but I'm doing it. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.
I will always listen. I will also defend our work. But I appreciate and respect that you're in the board, and the board should bring a strong perspective to this proposal. DYCD, I think, was describing a training program, not a system of walk-in career centers. And we haven't delved into, we weren't asked to speak to today, how we're selecting vendors for the training programs, of which we're operating, a couple dozen, with some nonprofit training providers, with CUNY training providers. So it really is a very different program that we're operating than what was described in DYCD. And with respect to the application of performance-based contracting for nonprofit vendors, this is something that the nonprofit community has worked on with the city over the years. They issued a guide, I think by the Nonprofit Resiliency Committee, on performance-based contracting for human services providers. We have, paid attention to that guidance. We also negotiated this contract with Goodwill, which is not a tiny community-based nonprofit, but quite a mature organization itself. And they are excited to be, working on a contract for Workforce One with performance-based components. There are details to always work through in the early stages of contracting, but this is aligned with Goodwill's mission. We have done a good job of onboarding them, and I'm expecting really positive results in the Bronx from the partnership.
I have one more issue. Sorry. On the EDSI contract, when I review the conduct, one of the requirements is to provide a labor attestation or a labor certification pursuant to a local law. What it means is that they're not having any labor dispute organizations like myself. And in there's also a requirement to report any violations that the particular vendor has done so. EDSI reported that they had violated the paid family leave pursuant to statement by applying different principles for males under the parent paid family leave than they were for females when they were having children. Even though the tax that was being asserted to those workers was the same because it was pursuant to law. And in essence, what they were doing is providing only 2 weeks of leave for the parents, the male parents, whereas the law required 12 weeks. Further, after a complaint was filed, EDSI attested that they corrected their policy moving forward, but made no assertions as to whether they returned the workers the tax that they had collected on behalf. So basically, they collected the money, on behalf of the workers, didn't provide the services. When one of the workers complained, went to DOL, the complaint was upheld and they corrected it moving forward, prospective. But there was no penalty, no correction, nothing that we are aware from the Department of Business Services about the violation that not only put them on notice, but basically said, you did not comply with the requirement, nor did you return any of the violations to the workers. Can you explain to me when one of these for-profit institutions commits such violation, if it was a nonprofit, they would have been investigated by the agency because you're required to do so under the 501c3. But a for-profit institution doesn't have to do that. If there is a violation of any law, local or otherwise, and one of those vendors who provide in the workforce centers continues to do so, what are the remedies? What are the warning letters that SBS says, no, you're not supposed to do that. But also, what is the help for the workers who were violated in the first place?
So I think it would depend on which administrative entity was investigating it. And our general counsel would advise us on our next steps. In the case of EDSI, I believe that you're saying there was a finding of an actual problem and a resolution that DOL negotiated, but they were not disbarred. So I can look further into if there were other options or what the prospective steps might be. But I think in a situation where there's an administrative procedure and an investigative finding from that administrative agency, aligning with the settlement or agreement that they've reached to resolve it, sounds appropriate. I'm happy to look into it further.
I'm going to condense this a little because we did run over a little bit in time, but that's okay. So as co-chairs, we've heard from several members that ended our board governance workshop in October, that there's new ways that the board might conduct its work to ensure we fulfill all of our obligations under WIOA, and also most importantly, formalize the ways in which the board is a convener and a strategist for the federal system. So we have bylaws. They have not been updated in roughly. So we took a look and there's a lot of things that need to change. So the co-chairs and a few members of the executive committee have been working through with talent to identify what those changes should be. What we're going to do is present all of you, not today, so we're going to present all of you with a red line version of what changes we think should be made and invite comment, feedback, etc. from everyone. Prior to doing that, we're going to submit the changes that the broad brush changes to the law department to get their initial take, because what we don't want to have is put something in front of you and then go to the law department say, no, this can't happen. So that's the order of operations. So we have a red line version right now. We're still tweaking it. We're going to have the law department review it. And then we're going to come to you with that same red line version with any adjustments from the law department for you to weigh in and make sure that the changes that there's nothing we can add. We can definitely add because we're happy to go back to the law department. We just want to get this first review done. And we think doing this will, and this is going to cover things such as membership. So some of you will be reaching out to confirm that the right member is here, that you're active, you just want to remain on the board. We're also going to, it's great. We're going to look at how member nominations are conducted. Right now, it is up to the chief executive to nominate members of the board, but we want to put in writing that the board actually can provide consultation to the chief executive on what that new member should be and nominations. We're also most importantly going to be putting in some requirements, budget reporting, so that we're not approving budgets we're approving budgets after the start of the fiscal year. And so this will impact our agency partners, but hopefully it will not be too burdensome. And then we're also going to be taking a look at procurements to make sure that the board's role is clear, it's in writing, and that we know what to expect, particularly as we come up against in about 18 months or so for the new round of what those contracts start, and the new RFPs start to be thinking about what those are. And then also setting priorities. This is important. We want to make sure that this board is at the table, the incoming administration, and setting the priorities of the workforce system within the city as a whole, and tying together all of the places across the different city agencies that do workforce, including our friends in New York City Public Schools. It's the first workforce training system that everyone, all of the young people in the city touch. So we need to do a better job of organizing this and using the board as a convener. I think is good. So we'll see if we can get this through. And then a calendar. So we'll be setting in place what you can expect as a board member, what the board will do, when, and we'll do this in conjunction with our agency partners to make sure it aligns with their decision-making processes. So, and so today we're going to need to vote to say that yes, we are going to be revising. And then so we're not agreeing to any of this language necessarily or any of the details yet. We're agreeing that the board as a whole agrees with moving forward with this revision. And then we will come back to you with that red line version and get all of your input, questions answered, and any additional changes that you want to put in. And we can add, it's not limited to. Yes, Randy, then B.
The workforce development deal,
Yes, yes,
which partially is also distracting.
yes,
So
that's right.
bylaws are going to automatic.
That's correct. That was
That's a
in my
big,
longer talking points that I would have read if we had time.
Oh, yeah.
So.
I should.
Right, the procurement process, what proactive roles is for? I know, maybe it's, but curious what is expected right now, other than check the process and make sure you output my the RFP process for first one, and that was all. I'm curious what's in there now. You want to check, and then also was just curious in terms of the transition. Agencies are required to provide transition memos and priorities, etc. Are we as a board finding any input, or are we allowed to have access to the areas in where the board strategy and operations are mentioned and said transition memos?
Yes, yeah, okay. Thanks, Stephen. So I think, sorry, go ahead. Turn around and talk to you. Just with respect to the procurement question, I think one of the things is that the board can make of it a bit of what it wants, right, in terms of getting the feedback. I think, Henry, to your point that you raised earlier, right, you're giving feedback on some of the contracting things that have happened. What we want to be able to do is engage the agencies prior to solicitations being released. So some of these conversations that we're having now about something in the past, we could be having, what does the future look like? And I think, again, knowing the agencies appreciate DYC and SBS and their willingness to engage with city agency partners, right? Like talent, HRA, other people in the workforce ecosystem internally, but also externally. We want to make sure that the board has a role there too in helping shape what actually is going out for bid. Randy just touches on some of what you are suggesting too. And, maybe the feedback will be, we'll give a blank slate on an RFP, but again, we want to hear that before something goes out. And so I think creating some space and a formal role and a process and a point in time prior to that solicitation. And again, procurement, despite all of the many efforts having done so it takes a long time. So we want to make sure that it's happening at the appropriate time on the front end. With respect to the transition, we're obviously as an office, and all offices across the city are tasked with putting forward transition materials. Obviously, with respect to talent, I can speak to, right? We support the board and reflect it as such. We're definitely interested in having feedback from board members with respect to what goes forward. I think specifically, right, like bylaws, for example, right? If we vote on it, that's a commitment to make sure that we are doing that. And I think that's important with respect to the strategic roadmap, obviously, and all the work that is shaped so far. There's still more to do. That will be finalized and published in the new year with the new administration in consultation with the board. And so there's still space to see what that takes shape, but we're obviously making sure that that is part of, reflecting the work that has already happened and the ideas, the 500 some odd ideas. We're not giving a laundry list of all of that, but making sure that the themes are being passed forward. So definitely happy to have more conversations too, separate from this.
There's an interest. To be thinking about innovative companies that may not have a presence in New York but are doing good work elsewhere. How do we bring them into the to look at other, and as Valerie said in her presentation, they've worked really hard to get some groups in that have never been part of these programs before. So I think there's a lot of interest in the board and our expertise here to bring those folks into the room. Not suggesting that they're getting our, we want them to be at the table to make sure that they understand the system. Potentially be able to, I'm going to just make sure not to make sure we had a question.
Hi. It's me again.
Yeah, exactly.
On the procurement issue, is one of the issues being contemplated the ability to register retroactive contracts? And I say that because the Workforce One contracts that we're talking about were registered retroactive to July 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year, but were presented to the board after the registration. And to me, as a board member, right, if I'm approving contracts and saying, yeah, no, and this board should be concerned if we're registering contracts that they go back 6 months or so, I would be concerned about that. So what if we say no?
That's right. That is. Exactly. If we say no, then services stop and nobody wants that, right? But so we were given a false choice in some ways. So with all due respect to my understanding how difficult the procurement system is and how hard our agencies are in getting information to us, but there's that is part of it. So it is definitely something that they're looking at in terms of the timing and in terms of when these budgets or contracts are presented to the board.
Can I just
And have meetings.
correct one thing for the record that the executive committee did vote in mid-June to approve the Workforce One contract. So they didn't vote after it was already registered.
Right, but does it become effective when the executive committee meets, or does it become effective when the board takes it? That's the question, because if the board met in October, got presented contract the executive committee had approved in June, with an effective date of July 1st, you had already encumbered hours and work for almost the whole quarter that the vendor would have been already responsible. The board as a whole would have rejected the executive committee's recommendations, then all kinds of litigation could have opened, because if they're doing the work, they probably deserve to get paid. So cart before the horse kind of thing.
It's a good bylaws question. It's good.
Exactly. We need to look into figure some of that's part. This is what brought this up.
I got a somewhat tangential question. Is the state workforce development board meet? All right, good. Because there was a period of time when it wasn't.
So it was just approved by the appointments committee maybe a year ago. And we are coordinating very closely. Obviously, some of us picked up a duty to make sure that we're aligned. Right. We have a questions before we.
So more to come. Promise you'll see red line versions and you can provide. Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure that everyone understands we will get more information on this topic. We can go through it as in much detail or have this in discussion as we can. But we do need to vote that we are going to advance the work of revising the bylaws. I mean, find the resolution on page 13 of your packets. Do I have a motion to approve? Yes. Excellent. Do I have a second? All in favor? All right. So pleased to know as part of this juice. Right. But one of the.
Thank you, Meryl. So as Meryl shared earlier today, I'm Audrey Powell with Cooperative Home Care Associates and the other half of this co-chair dynamic too. So now we are going to hear from Scott French, Administrator of New York City Human Resources Administration, to provide an update on work requirements attached to SNAP and Medicaid, followed by a group discussion. So while you're at the tables. You can find Scott's bio on page 14 in your packet. We also have a few guests in addition to Scott that we've asked to join the presentation so that they'll be at the tables. And there are folks who are heavily steeped in this and can also offer insight. So Scott, bring your roadshow up here.
Hey, thanks for having me. So yes, I'm Scott French. I'm the administrator for the New York City Human Resources Administration, which is part of the Department of Social Services under the leadership of Commissioner Molly Rosso Park. And so I'm going to talk to you about these things called work requirements that have been in the news a lot over the last period of several months, then basically since July 4th, when HR1 was passed. I'm going to focus primarily on SNAP, but I will talk a little bit about Medicaid at the end, and we will jump in. So HR1 for SNAP, it did a variety of different things, right? It impacts at a variety of different levels. There are things here that will impact city and state governments and budgets. So the first two things you see, these are cost shifts the federal government is putting into place that are for the first time, especially the second one, the benefit cost shift. That could, in theory, shift costs of over $1 billion to New York State, and by extension, much of that to New York City. And so those are very direct to cities. What we're here to talk about primarily is the impact to individuals who rely on SNAP to feed themselves and feed their families. So there's a couple of different provisions that were put into place. The first is ABOD, or able-bodied adults without dependents, and those work requirements, which I will talk about much more in depth in the presentation. But that is basically implementing a work requirement that has been waived for quite some time in New York State, but also many other places across the country. Within that ABOD waiver, there used to be groups of people who were automatically exempted, such as the homeless, such as children aging out of foster care and veterans. And as part of HR1, those automatic exemptions were revoked for those populations. So there's a much larger group of people. We anticipate up to, there's currently 100,000 people identified as ABODs in New York City. We anticipate under the new expanded definition, another 130,000 existing SNAP clients would potentially fall under the ABOD work requirements. And then there's obviously any new SNAP participants here and then added to that. So there's not an insignificant number of people who now will need to comply with these work requirements or prove an exemption to keep their SNAP benefits, which is a very significant shift in how they're used to managing the benefits. Additionally, there are some benefits that are just being taken away from people, such as there's a connection between the HEAP program and individuals being able to get the sort of highest SNAP benefit possible, sort of automatically based on some matches that we were doing. That has been taken away and requires more proof on behalf of participants to achieve those benefits. And lastly is the revocation of benefits for certain eligibility immigrant populations who are legally authorized to be in the United States. That is currently now moving to the courts as there is a legal action submitted this week. All of this combines to then impact local economies. SNAP estimates that every SNAP dollar generates $1.54 in local economic activity. So the impact of all of these could be approximately $900 million.
So work requirements. There are three different work requirements which can become extremely confusing for individuals because there's work requirements for individuals who receive cash assistance. Then there's work requirements for individuals who receive SNAP. If you receive both, you have both of those work requirements. And you can sort of see the requirements don't align with each other. So this is just general who is subject. We're looking at primarily age here. You'll see for cash assistance, it's those between 18 and 59. For SNAP general work requirements, that's between the ages of 16 and 59. And then for SNAP ABOD, which is going into place, that is now between the ages of 18 and 64. So in theory, an individual could be exempt from cash assistance work requirements and SNAP general work requirements, but because they're 61, they may have to comply with SNAP ABOD requirements. That's a very complicated sentence to just wrap your head around, let alone for people who receive SNAP to understand what does this mean for them. So these changes, right, while negative impacting people, they are also confusing, which is going to probably likely lead to people failing to comply because they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. So our goal at HRA, and I think collectively as a city, is to, as we implement these things, to make it as simple and streamlined as possible. And that is really a whole of city responsibility and opportunity. So it's not just HRA, it really is extending to those in the workforce development world, those within WIOA and other avenues as real partners in helping to support New Yorkers retain their benefits. So quickly, and you have much of this information in your packets as well, we sort of see for cash assistance, those 60 years of age or older are exempt, and primarily people who may have a physical or mental health limitation that will limit their ability to comply with those requirements. For SNAP general work requirements, primarily people are exempted because they are already working, because the eligibility for SNAP is broader than for cash assistance, or they're meeting requirements of another program, whether that's cash assistance or unemployment, or taking care of children under 6, or participating in alcohol or drug treatment programs, or studying at least half time. Under SNAP ABOD, the way to be exempt from those requirements are if you're exempt from the SNAP general work requirements, unless you're someone 60 to 64. And then primarily if you're pregnant, you have someone who is under the age of 14 in your home, or you are medically certified as being physically or mentally unfit for employment. One final way is if your area has a waiver. So currently, New York State has a waiver from the SNAP ABOD requirements that goes to the end of February 2026. That was revoked by the USDA for a period of time in the fall, where they said the waiver was going to be pulled as of October 1st, and the state and the city were going to have to implement ABOD within 30 days. We actually did implement ABOD within 30 days, though we didn't want to. But luckily, due to legal action in the state of Rhode Island, as part of the failure for the federal government to distribute SNAP benefits to people in November, that case also had a finding that the federal government didn't have the authority to revoke a waiver they already granted early. So that means the waiver is back in place until the end of February, which is a good thing. So it means there will be no negative actions for any SNAP recipients who are identified as ABODs for another several months. The first month where people will have to comply, they're not in March of 2026, which allows the agency a lot more time to make sure we have all of our systems in place. It also allows us a lot more time to really set up partnerships with in this room to help support and serve folks. Now, how to meet the requirements. This also becomes very confusing because depending on whether you're cash assistance, SNAP General, or SNAP ABOD, you can meet the requirements in very different ways. Cash assistance, and I won't go fully into depth here, but cash assistance has the most rigorous requirements in regards to, right, a very sort of clearly defined
35-hour-a-week commitment that a person needs to participate in. That's a combination of activities that are defined as like core activities versus like job development activities. You know, and those are really managed through HRA. We have our own set of career services providers through what we call our PACE program. And so those providers work with each individual and will put together the right combination of activities for folks. But it is very rigorous. You know, I think one of the challenges we've had in the past of sort of integrating HRA's workforce development and WIOA workforce development has been specifically cash assistance because it's very strict. The timekeeping requirements and other things don't really align with, I think, a flexibility that's something that is afforded a little bit more in the WIOA world. For SNAP General, individuals just have to provide us proof that they are, you know, employed. You know, we sort of check someone's SNAP General requirements at their annual recertification. So we do that once a year. For ABOD, right, someone can do a variety of activities. They can work for at least 80 hours a month. They can participate in a work program at least 80 hours a month, which can either be SNAP EMT or other federal, state, or local work programs, such as WIOA funded programs, and or participate on the third one here in what's called the work fair here, but that could also be thought of as a community service. And this is something that is sort of equivalent to what? So for individuals who do this, whether they want to volunteer, say, at a local CBO that they might receive services from, or some other organization that needs volunteers, this will greatly reduce the number of hours someone has to do on a monthly basis because it gets calculated like work. So basically, you would calculate someone's SNAP grant divided by the local minimum wage, and that would end up in that's the number of hours someone would have to do. So in theory, depending on the person, you know, benefits and their household composition, if they were to volunteer, they may only have to work or volunteer 9 hours a month, which is a much greater thing. So that is something we are really focusing on. HRA is how do we set up a system that can support that, and how can we partner with others who want to help support that. So how it works, right? And this is really going to be about the SNAP ABOD requirements is there's a single point of entry as it relates to SNAP, right? Everyone on SNAP has to come through HRA. They have to be assessed by an HRA benefit specialist, whether that's on their initial application or their yearly recertification. And at that time, we will determine does the individual meet any of the exemption criteria so that they would not be identified as an ABOD. For those who are exempt, we would say you are exempt. We'll see you in a year. You know, those types of things. For those who do have to comply with ABOD requirements, right, we are going to initially refer those individuals to our workforce development providers, who will then work with individuals to connect them to opportunities in the community. And it's going to be a much broader scope of activities, right? That might connect them to work that SBS does, what NYC does, or directly with, you know, providers in the workforce space. You know, so those individuals would be referred to one place to come up with a plan. You know, for individuals who we determine through assessment may actually have a barrier, but can't sort of prove it at that point in time, we will be referring those individuals to another program we have called WeCare that will determine if someone has a physical or mental health barrier to that. We have also put out a form that is available on our website that we've spoken to DHMH, HMH, happy to talk to other healthcare providers as well. A very simple clinical form individuals can submit to us where a clinical provider can simply state this individual has a barrier to complying, and they just let us know for how long will they have the barrier. We don't need to know what the barrier is. We don't need to know any of that information. We just need someone who is a clinical provider to provide that information to us. And then, you know, lastly, sort of what I've mentioned before, key areas of focus that we're working on, we have already been discussing, right? Whether it's within sort of the workforce development strategy workshop that we've been having or other conversations is how do we connect individuals on SNAP into a broader sense of workforce provider opportunities, right? That they would otherwise be, able to participate in, and sort of opportunities with providers in the community who want to step forward. What I can say is next week, we will be rolling out a way in which nonprofit organizations can step forward to be considered as sites where individuals can do community service, or maybe even do more by engaging in some type of workforce development program that can count towards their compliance. We'll sort of be outlining that at a meeting our good friends at Robin Hood are holding on Monday with a variety of providers, and then we will follow that up with a communication to the broader network, as well as posting things on our website. I can say much more detail about this is available on the HRA website. If you'd like to listen to me talk for 60 minutes to go super in depth, there's a webinar you can watch, as well as links to the documents I've talked about, and that will be the place where we update things. But that is sort of SNAP AVOD. I want to take a moment before we pivot to questions and or the small group discussions is Medicaid. So Medicaid also in HR1 has work requirements that this is very new for Medicaid. Medicaid is also not a single point of entry like SNAP, right? There are many different ways folks engage with or manage their Medicaid coverage. And that system is not one that has handled work requirements before. So that is something I know members of this board are very much focused on and interested in. It's going to be something that requires a partnership between city government, state government, local stakeholders, other, health systems, to determine how that will actually work. I think the way HRA is approaching the SNAP program provides a model to build off of, but that is something that is coming. There's a little bit longer of a timeline, but not much. The federal government, CMS, has until June of 2026 to put out official guidance as to what will the Medicaid work requirements look like. Right now, they seem to mirror SNAP pretty closely. So I think the hope will be that they actually mirror SNAP, because that will provide an opportunity for at the state level them to figure out and look at ways in which we might be able to data share. So if you are applying with SNAP, or applying with Medicaid, but those are lots of things that have to be talked through. And for the Medicaid requirements, those will be required to go into place at the end of December of 2026. So that is only 6 months from when CMS would put out the rules to when a system would need to be up in place to manage this. And while the numbers on SNAP are very large, I think we all can understand the number of Medicaid people on Medicaid who will have to comply with this will be much larger than that. It's the impact on people potentially using food supports and health supports because of the confusion of compliance with the system is very much something that's very concerning. So with that, questions? There's a lot of complicated stuff. So there's a lot more to it.
I haven't done this work in a long time. We still have the web program. Is that the community service?
We do not have a web anymore. We have community service that is more flexible and isn't based in, right? Web was primarily you went to work at a city agency to do work for city agencies. We don't do that anymore. But we do have a way for folks to, connect with CPOs.
No more web.
No more web.
For the unions who have about that.
No, actually, you have
but
JTP.
I have one other. Is there any tie between your cash amount and the number of hours you need to work, or is it just a straight up you got to work 30 hours, 35 hours, whatever it's going to be?
For cash assistance as well, cash assistance is a little bit more difficult because it's two different components one has to do. We could, in theory, reduce one of your components called 4 hours. If you're doing a work-like activity, whether it's community service or some other piece of that, we can reduce the hours, as long as people also comply with that. So that is something we're also really trying to make sure participants are aware of, our providers know, to talk to people about.
It's not an automatic formula.
It would be an automatic formula if that's what the person chose that they wanted to do, right? There is also individualized choice. And you can only reduce the hours if you do specific activities that are the equivalent of work, as defined by the regulations.
This is my big concern is that in theory, you could end up doing work or an equivalent of work well below what the minimum wage based upon the benefits you're getting.
If you have not sure I'm following.
Sure. I mean, if you get different levels of cash assistance, right?
Mhm.
You're only eligible for it, you're on,
Yes,
right? But if you have to do 30 hours a week or 35 hours a week.
Right.
If you did a straight up calculation of the amount of money you're getting, versus the hours that you're working, you could now be significantly below minimum wage, couldn't you?
no, if you are participating in an activity that qualifies as work equivalent, we would reduce the hours that you need to do. Sometimes people decide, I want to do training. I'm not going to reduce
Yeah,
your
but that's a little
hours
bit
for
of
training.
semantics, right? Couldn't
Well,
community service,
it's regulation. So they're
community service
very
would be considered a work equivalent?
yes. So for that, we would make we would reduce the calculation and someone's hours would then be different. They would be lower.
Okay, thank
Just a point of information, WEP is now job training participants. They do work, they have them, and they're now represented by a unit. My unit.
Yeah, it's a much smaller program, but
Yeah.
yes.
No, it's like a hybrid where they get partial union benefits, which we provide, and they still have to follow certain rules. There's a second subset in the Department of Youth and Community Development for younger people under the age of 18, which still have a requirement, but they're also in the youth. So it's now, depending on peak hours, about 3,000 people in the summer, but it goes down to about 2,000 people. So they're there. After 6 months. They have a right to then pick up a union job, a city line, but they have to be interviewed, they have to go through a whole process. Hi, Scott. In terms of the work requirements tracking for the 80 hours, I know there's a difference between Medicaid at the state level and the city level. For those who are disabled and have agents and stuff. You mentioned the possibility coordination. So once you qualify for one, you could possibly have complied with the other.
Yes.
That would require a seamless transition with the state and the city.
Yes, I wasn't saying that it was easy, but I think it's an opportunity if they track together, right? Because I think trying to also for an individual's perspective, right? You don't want someone to feel like they're having to comply with three different things, right? So I think that, and I think the state would need to be involved. I'm not sure where they are on the Medicaid side of what they're thinking, but in theory, I think one could conceptualize a data match between the State Department of Health and OTDA, right? Because OTDA ultimately tracks SNAP compliance and AVODs, and we report to them every month to say, these are the people who have not complied, right? Versus these are the people who have complied. That there could be a way, if there is a way to legally find out to do it, that I think you could do a match so that if OTDA says these individuals are in compliance with SNAP for this month, they would, in theory, as long as the Medicaid requirements truly are the same, be in compliance for Medicaid. And that just from an administrative perspective, potentially might be something that, minimizes an administrative burden.
Yeah.
But I am also not the person who thinks.
Yeah, my question is more of a legal one because the HRA part is an internally built tracking system.
Yes, but then
Whereas the state, right, where the state has this outsourced system of vendor who does not comply as of yet with American Fitness requirement.
Hmm.
Right. In our view, opening up the city. So the question would be, is it upstream or downstream? Like if it's the city compliant with the state or the state sending you the data you match, it will be a whole different thing.
I mean, my thought, and again, I'm not the one making this decision, but we do, right, while the state does not go into the system that we utilize to track compliance, we do send a file to them that reports to them, here are the people who, primarily it's, here are the people who are not compliant. And then the state enters that into their system, right? And so that system would then define the people who are not in compliance, right? And where they sort of are on that not compliance path of 3 months. So that's sort of between those two systems is what I was saying maybe is an opportunity. It might not, though. There could definitely be something legal that brings it to a halt, you know, for a variety of reasons.
Scott, where does benefits kind of cliff and eligibility come in here? Right, they're imposing work requirements to maintain these safety net benefits, but someone who's meeting a requirement to work 30 hours or 35 hours a week at minimum wage may exceed the poverty level that is required to be eligible for the benefit. And so, I mean, I think that's their goal, right? Is to reduce reliance on the system and eligibility. So how is that being tracked and managed?
Sure. So, yeah, so the benefits cliff is very real, especially for those on cash assistance, right? Because you don't have to have that much of a change in your income to become ineligible for cash assistance and still be very, very low income. And so there is at the state level, about a year ago, there was legislation passed where individuals, right, who sort of roll off of cash, in theory, would have rolled off of cash assistance because of an increase in income and employment, do get a 6-month disregard, right? As long as they're still under a certain threshold, where they will receive benefits for another 6 months to help with that transition. I believe it is up to 200% of the federal poverty level. I know there is conversations, you know, at the state level as well, amongst a variety of folks looking to see if that can get increased to 300% of the federal poverty level to cover more people. But right now there is there's sort of a 6-month cash assistance coverage, as well as for individuals who do leave the cash assistance caseload, who are receiving childcare, they will receive another 12 months of childcare after they leave the caseload. So those are sort of two things that are happening that does not cover the affordability gap that people experience, right? But there are some things that we have now that did not exist in the past, where you make $1 over and all of a sudden you're not in cash assistance, right? You are not in a place where you're able to likely be on your needs.
And then a second question, there was reporting today that although I guess the ABOD waiver was extended to February, there's an additional threat that relates to a demand for detailed data sharing from SNAP administrators to the federal government, which I think is being litigated, but this is a separate threat to eligibility with a different timeline potentially impacting recipients?
So my understanding of it, as I sort of read it and read sort of like part of the statements that the USDA put out, is that I believe what they are focusing on when they say that they will withhold funds from states who have not yet provided this detailed data, is that they would withhold the state administrative funds so that it wouldn't be individual benefits, but that it would be, there's a certain percentage that states get and localities get for admin support that you can get from the federal government. I think that's what the secretary was referring to, though we're not fully clear. But I know it is confusing enough that people I think are confused, but my understanding of it was that it was really focused on withholding the administrative benefits from the states, since the states are the one not providing the state of them.
Thank you, Scott, so much. So at this point, we had planned to go into like a group discussion at the tables, and we had 3 questions for folks, but clearly we were overly ambitious with the agenda, but all good. So actually what I'm going to do is just put forth first in your packets there, the requirements that Scott was talking about. There are 2 like 1-pagers, so that's really helpful to refer back to. But what we're going to do is just put the three questions out there. And, if you have thoughts or things come to mind, please feel free to share. Okay. So here are the questions. How will SNAP and Medicaid work requirements, including the resulting strain on benefits recipients and on our healthcare and social services systems, impact your organization? The second question is, how might your organization participate in citywide efforts to make things easier for New Yorkers who are impacted? And then the third one is, what questions are, or what concerns and open questions would you like the city, the board, and our partners in healthcare and social services to pay attention to related to these work requirements? Imagine there are a lot of questions and a lot of things we should be considering because this is going to impact people. Eric?
Just a quick thought for those that really like legal minutiae. I have a legal background, so I think I do. So somebody pointed out to me that work experience and work-related experience are not exactly same thing. Right? So you could, for example, be getting employment for wages, and that's a traditional job as we think of, or you could, as somebody else mentioned earlier, you could be doing community service or an internship or a different type of experience. So I think it's important that we be mindful of the spectrum of different opportunities. And for some individuals, for example, that have been out of the workforce for a while, a community service experience or a work-related experience may be more appropriate, but it's not necessarily going to pay a wage to them or a wage that we would think per se. So just want to make sure that that nuance is not lost.
And I also want to include or ask the guests who are in the room who have the expertise. We're going to join the tables, but if you can come in to the tables and also offer your thoughts on the months. Daniel, who do you want up here? Just say who you want up here, Daniel. Want to a lot, right?
I mean, I think we've all been overwhelmed by the scale, and I've heard some of Scott's remarks multiple times. Every time I hear it, it's overwhelming in terms of thinking about the scale of impact with a number of people, but also the systems level. So appreciate how much you all have been grappling with this in real time. I was on a call with Scott at one point where he was giving us updates of the court cases, like almost minute by minute. So this has not been an easy process. I think one of the things I was thinking about today, though, is just about as the number of individuals come on, as these rules come into effect and the number of individuals are impacted, have we done an analysis of the number of positions that would be required in the employment sectors of the city to actually receive these folks? I mean, is there an assumption that the number of jobs that are needed to help this actually exists? So it's questioning, let alone all of this, it's all work jobs.
So I think we don't know, but the answer is probably no, which I think is a challenge, but also an opportunity because I think it allows us to create partnerships and relationships that maybe weren't natural partnerships and relationships as it related to like the HRA portion of the workforce. And I think that is stuff we have been talking about. I think what we're going to roll out next week will also, I think, provide some additional pathways for folks in provide some insight in regards to like, what do people have to offer, right? Because it's not just, it's not simple as well, right? So there will be requirements for organizations that want to step forward. We're trying to make it as simple as possible. But I think it's one of those where like, we'll see, we're definitely going to track the trends, right? Because there's also a compliance trend. I need to sort of see how many people are actually going to comply. It will probably be delayed because individuals you cannot comply for up to 3 months before you would see any negative impacts to your SNAP benefits. So while March, it begins, March is just month 1, right? So in theory, if someone decided not to comply, they're not going to see an impact to their benefits until June. So, I think there's going to be a little bit of a delay too, to really understand like, what do we think the baseline is going to look like with that point in time we need to be engaged in certain things.
Question. I have a question about the regulations for what counts as community service or volunteering. It's just the issues though. What's the timing of that? Strike me that to be adult.
So I think there's a general definition of what is considered that. And then within that, Ray would be the agency that is determined and defines that, like, based on what we know, we believe this is an authorized community service, and the activities they're going to engage people with meet the definition as we would define it. So that does provide us with that, which is so we are looking at it in that way too. We're trying to be really open-minded in regards to what we think might be opportunities that folks can access.
Yeah. I just want to say to bullet point 2, Scott and I have talked a few different times as an intermediary, as an organization that represents a coalition. The coalition world is obviously very conscious of this, and just want to express the desire that folks in the intermediary space want to have to work in alignment and support to maximize communication and to be able to try to make sure we're on the same page. And one of the great examples of that is that actually Scott's going to be at our conference next week too, to talk to the workforce community. I'm sorry, that was just the plight. I don't know if heard that, and also with some coalition members and other organizations that'll be part of this. But all this to say, there's a shared sense that we're in this together, and that is something that I want to continue to champion, and I know the other intermediaries do too.
So it may come to surprise to a lot of people that of the 332,000 city workers, there are about 10,000 city workers that are classified as what we call per diem or part-timers, who through no fault of their own qualify partially for Medicaid because there's no job available for them. Like, I will give an example: school crossing guards who work during the school year. They work 20 hours a week. If it happens to be a holiday that it is legally approved by the Department of Education, but not covered under the one NYPD where they are eligible for, they're not eligible for city's health insurance because they fall below the 20-hour threshold, but they are eligible for Medicaid. In the summer, there's about half of the positions have the schools closed. People select by seniority, the other half basically gets laid off. They're eligible for that period for Medicaid. They would not qualify under the 80-hour work week. So one of the concerns we have, likewise, the school construction, NYCHA. We have these folks that do the cleaning in NYCHA that we represent, same situation. We have folks in parks that when the winter comes, they fall down. They're called per diems. They would generally, and it's not that they don't want to work. They work with the city of New York. They want to work, but the work by virtue of their seasonal nature, they become ineligible. Lifeguards, I'm a prime example, right? We work really hard to raise the wages for lifeguard and recruitment. When the lifeguard season, when it gets cold, a bunch of them get laid off and they are eligible for Medicaid. So we are very concerned of that group that we're gonna end up losing. And this is a workforce the city relies, and they're about 10,000. You would also be surprised that during the last contract negotiations that we just updated, we had to pay up for them to reach the $18 an hour minimum job. They were 15, 16 bucks. And we made a big effort to try to raise their wages. That's the same group of folks that is going to be likely to be dropped. And we have, I'm going to tell you, we've tried different ways. I mean, we can make up the work. In the summer, they working hard. During the school year, they're there, but the children leave. You know, you don't qualify, you just don't qualify. So I don't know, Scott, because if the city loses this 10,000 workers here that are doing very critical work, I don't know what happens, right? So I guess my question would be, if I'm a crossing guard and I work 20 hours a week and there happens to be a holiday that is not approved by us, is not collectively covered, it's not a federal holiday, and I only work 15 hours that week, and that happens in CUNY, that happens in all the educational, is there a way to make up for the difference between 76 hours and 80, for instance? Is there, I don't know, something that could be done to qualify so we don't lose it? Because I think we're very concerned that that's what's going to happen if they lose the benefit. They might as well not work and they go in cash assistance and then they're going to make less. They don't make that much to begin with, but they're already borderline to begin with. And now they're going to lose health insurance. Then why do it?
Yes, very true. I think if they're working, I think for SNAP, right? I won't speak for Medicaid just because we're not sure how that's going to sort of play itself out. For SNAP, even if they worked 15 hours that week, I think based on the calculation, right, they would probably be okay. Because if someone's working to meet compliance requirements, we could do a similar calculation to say they're complying with the work requirements because the hours would get reduced because it's a work equivalent. So we would do the same. Whatever you're getting for SNAP, we would divide it by the minimum wage to sort of determine, what are the hours that would meet that. So there's a way to do that, but there's also a way to fill a gap. Absolutely, of like coming up with something so that someone, if they truly need a 4 hours on that week, our providers will work with folks to figure out what is something you can do for 4 hours so that you don't lose your SNAP benefits. And that can be a variety of different activities we could have someone do. They can do job search that they're notating and they submit it to us. So there's other sort of things that folks can do that, will be some effort, but not maximum effort to make sure that, they would be seen in compliance.
Yeah, by the way, that 10,000 doesn't include the nonprofit workers that we represent. We have about 20,000 nonprofit workers, home care workers.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, with home care, we're talking about a population that 57% rely on these benefits, so it's not been Medicaid. And they are working, but it's still gonna be meeting these requirements and enrolling and re-enrolling. So it's obviously preaching to the choir. This is really something that we have to work together as a coalition and collaboration. Thank you. Thank you, everyone at the board. So just as we conclude, I want to just let you all know that we're going to be working on a meeting calendar for 2026. Never a shortage of work to do, right? And we'll send out further details regarding that, the meetings for the dates for next year's meeting, right? And with that, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn this very lively meeting. Thank you. A second. All right. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Say happy holidays.